The crystal spires of the Galactic Council chambers gleamed under the artificial suns of Station Nexus Prime. Within the most exclusive gambling hall reserved for nobility, the air thrummed with tension thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Lord Zarthek of the Veltar Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes, the bioluminescent threads pulsing with his elevated heart rate as he studied the human across the hexagonal gaming table. The human called himself Marcus Chen, though Zarthek doubted that was his real name. Humans were notorious for their deceptions, after all. This particular specimen appeared unremarkable by any galactic standard, average height for his species, brown hair cropped short in military fashion, and those peculiar brown eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. What truly irritated Zarthek was the human's complete lack of proper deference. The creature sat casually in his chair, occasionally sipping from a glass of some primitive earth beverage, as if he belonged in the company of galactic nobility. "The terms are simple," Zarthek announced, his voice carrying the authority of 10 generations of Veltar aristocracy. The other nobles gathered around their table leaned forward with interest. Word had spread quickly through the station's upper levels that Lord Zarthek was about to make an unprecedented wager. "You will face 3 trials of my choosing: combat, intellect, and endurance. If you succeed in even one, I will forfeit my family's mining rights to the Kepler 442 system." The assembled crowd murmured in shock. The Kepler 442 system contains 17 planets rich in rare earth minerals, worth approximately 40 billion galactic credits. It had been in the Veltar family for over 3 centuries. Marcus took another sip of his drink, seemingly unimpressed. "And if I fail all 3? Zarthek's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his species. "You will become my personal servant for the remainder of your natural life. Your freedom, your dignity, your very existence will belong to me." The human set down his glass with deliberate care. Around the table, representatives from a dozen different species watched in fascination. There were the crystalline Zephi, whose bodies chimed softly with each breath. The massive, fur-covered Urgathai delegation stood behind their seats, too large to sit in the provided chairs. Even a few of the rarely seen Phantom Collective had materialized for this spectacle, their translucent forms barely visible in the chamber's lighting. "Why?" Marcus asked simply. "Excuse me? Why make this wager? You clearly think I'll lose. What do you gain from having a human servant?" Zarthek's bioluminescent threads flared brighter, betraying his anger. "Your species has been nothing but trouble since joining the Galactic Council. You upset traditions that have stood for millennia. You ignore proper protocols. You act as if you belong among races that achieved interstellar travel while you were still throwing rocks at each other." The human nodded slowly, as if considering this perspective. "So this is about putting humanity in its place." "Precisely. When I defeat you utterly, it will demonstrate to the galaxy that humans are nothing special. That your recent military victories were flukes, your technological advances mere lucky accidents, and your diplomatic successes the result of others' misplaced charity." Marcus stood up, extending his hand in the human gesture of agreement. "Deal." Zarthek stared at the offered hand with disgust. The human custom of physical contact was revolting to most galactic species. Still, he had witnesses to satisfy. The Veltar Lord extended one of his 4 arms and briefly grasped the human's appendage, suppressing a shudder at the alien warmth. "The first trial will be combat," Zarthek announced. "Tomorrow at the 7th hour, in the Nexus Prime Arena. You may use any weapon of your choosing." "And you?" "I will use the traditional weapons of my house: plasma whips and molecular disruptors." The crowd began to disperse, excited chatter filling the air as the various species discussed what they had witnessed. The Zephi chimed their amusement, while the Urgathai grunted their approval of the coming violence. Only the Phantom Collective remained silent, their translucent forms flickering as they observed the human with what might have been interest. As the gambling hall emptied, Zarthek's personal aide, a nervous Veltar named Keshare, approached cautiously. "My lord, are you certain about this wager?" The human seemed confident. Zarthek's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Humans are delusional by nature. They believed themselves capable of anything, despite evidence to the contrary. Tomorrow, I will crush this specimen in single combat, and the galaxy will remember why the Veltar have ruled for 3 millennia. Meanwhile, Marcus Chen made his way through the station's lower levels, past the luxury shops and exotic restaurants that catered to the galaxy's elite. He found what he was looking for in a small, dimly lit establishment that served alcohol to species capable of processing ethanol. The bartender, a grizzled Korthax with cybernetic implants replacing half his head, looked up as Marcus entered. "Heard about your little bet with the Veltar Prince," the bartender growled in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "You got a death wish, human?" Marcus slid onto a barstool designed for beings roughly his size. "Just evening the odds." "Evening the odds?" The Korthax laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You know what a Veltar combat specialist can do? They got 4 arms, each one stronger than your whole body. Their natural armor can deflect small arms fire. And that's before they put on their fancy gear. I've done my research. Research ain't gonna save you when he's peeling your skin off with those plasma whips." The bartender poured Marcus another glass of the brown liquid he'd been drinking. "What's this stuff anyway?" "Bourbon. From Earth." "Bourbon," the Korthax repeated, testing the word. "Humans and your poison. You know the Veltar got enhanced reflexes too? See in spectrum ranges you can't even imagine? They're apex predators from a high-gravity world where everything wants to kill everything else." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "What do you know about honor in Veltar culture?" The question seemed to surprise the bartender. "Honor? Everything's about honor with those bug-faced aristocrats." "Why?" "Just curious about the rules of engagement." The next morning, news of the impending combat trial had spread throughout Station Nexus Prime. The arena, normally used for gladiatorial entertainment featuring various galactic species, was packed beyond capacity. Betting pools had opened across the station, with odds heavily favoring Lord Zarthek. The most generous odds for the human were 37 to 1. In the arena's preparation chambers, Zarthek donned his ancestral combat armor. The biometallic suit had been crafted by master artisans 300 years ago, incorporating technologies that the Veltar kept secret from other species. Microservos amplified his already considerable strength, while sensor arrays enhanced his natural predatory instincts. The armor's surface could shift from mirror-bright reflection to complete light absorption, providing both defense and camouflage options. His weapons were equally impressive. The plasma whips could extend up to 30 meters, their superheated energy capable of cutting through most known materials. The molecular disruptors fired concentrated beams that broke apart atomic bonds, effectively disintegrating whatever they touched. Combined with his species' natural advantages, Zarthek was essentially a one-being army. In the opposite chamber, Marcus Chen was putting on what appeared to be simple military fatigues and combat boots. His weapon selection seemed almost comically inadequate, a single blade approximately 30 centimeters long, with what looked like a simple metal construction. No energy weapons, no technological enhancements, no armor to speak of. The arena floor was a circular space 200 meters in diameter, covered in sand that had been imported from a dozen different worlds. Viewing galleries rose in tiers around the circle, each section designed for different species' visual and comfort requirements. The Veltar nobility occupied the prime viewing positions, their bioluminescent robes creating a spectacular light show as they anticipated their champion's victory. A holographic announcer appeared at the center of the arena, its form shifting between various species' preferred aesthetics as it addressed the crowd in multiple languages simultaneously. "Citizens of the galaxy, witness today a trial by combat between Lord Zarthek of the Veltar Empire and the human Marcus Chen. The combat will continue until one participant yields, becomes incapacitated, or dies. By ancient law, no outside interference is permitted once combat begins." The crowd roared its approval, thousands of voices, clicks, chimes, and roars creating a cacophony of anticipation. Lord Zarthek entered the arena first, his armor gleaming under the artificial sunlight. He moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator, his 4 arms moving independently as he tested his weapons. The plasma whips crackled to life, leaving glowing trails in the air as he spun them in complex patterns. The molecular disruptors hummed with barely contained energy. The crowd's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. This was what they had come to see, a demonstration of Veltar superiority that would put the upstart humans in their proper place. Marcus entered from the opposite side of the arena, and the crowd's enthusiasm diminished noticeably. He looked absurdly small and under-equipped compared to his opponent. Some spectators began to wonder if this would even qualify as entertainment, or if it would simply be an execution. The holographic announcer raised its form high above the arena floor. Combatants, prepare yourselves. Combat begins in 10 seconds. Zarthek settled into a traditional Veltar battle stance, his weight distributed across all 4 limbs, weapons ready. His enhanced sensors swept the arena, mapping every grain of sand, every shadow, every possible avenue of attack or retreat. Marcus simply stood upright, the small blade held loosely in his right hand. 5 seconds. The crowd held its breath. 3, 2, 1. Begin! Zarthek exploded into motion, his powerful legs launching him across the arena at speeds that most species couldn't even track. His plasma whips lashed out in a coordinated attack pattern that would have overwhelmed a dozen ordinary opponents. The first whip aimed for Marcus's legs, intending to cripple his mobility. The second targeted his torso, designed to inflict maximum pain without immediately killing. Zarthek wanted the human to suffer before he died. Marcus moved. It wasn't the desperate dodge that spectators expected. It wasn't even the trained evasion of a professional soldier. It was something else entirely, the fluid, almost casual step to the side that seemed to barely displace any sand beneath his feet. The plasma whip that should have severed his legs passed harmlessly through empty air. The second whip, aimed at where his torso should have been, found only space. Zarthek's enhanced reflexes allowed him to adjust his attack pattern instantly. His molecular disruptors swiveled to track the human's new position, preparing to end the fight quickly. Marcus wasn't there anymore. Somehow, impossibly, the human had closed the distance between them. He was inside Zarthek's reach, past the effective range of the plasma whips, moving with a precision that defied belief. The small blade in his hand moved in a simple, economical arc. Zarthek felt the first cut as a line of fire across the joint where his upper left arm connected to his shoulder. It shouldn't have been possible. His armor was designed to withstand plasma weapons and explosive impacts. A primitive metal blade should have been completely ineffective. But, as he looked down, he saw energized fluid seeping from a perfectly straight cut in the biometallic material. The human had somehow found the one weak point in his armor's construction, a microscopic gap where the arm joint required flexibility. Impossible, Zarthek hissed, speaking in his native language. Marcus didn't respond. He was already moving again, that same fluid motion that seemed to exist outside normal physics. Zarthek fired his molecular disruptors, the beams tracing burning lines through the air where the human had been a fraction of a second before. The human was behind him now. Zarthek felt another line of fire, this time across the back of his right knee where the armor's joint required flexibility. Another perfect cut, finding another microscopic weakness. The crowd had fallen silent. This wasn't what anyone had expected to see. Zarthek spun around, using all 4 arms to create a whirling pattern of plasma and molecular energy that should have been impossible to avoid in the confines of the arena. His enhanced sensors showed the human directly in front of him, well within range of his weapons. Marcus stepped forward into the attack. The plasma whips passed over his head as he ducked with timing measured in microseconds. The molecular disruptor beams crossed the space where he should have been as he twisted his body in ways that seemed to violate basic anatomy. And, somehow, impossibly, he was inside Zarthek's guard again. This time, the small blade found the gap in Zarthek's neck armor. The Veltar Lord felt the metal touch the vulnerable nerve cluster that controlled his weapon systems. One small movement, and he would be paralyzed. One slightly deeper cut, and he would be dead. Yield, Marcus said quietly. The single word carried across the silent arena like a thunderclap. Zarthek's mandibles clicked frantically as he processed what had just happened. According to his enhanced sensors, the human had moved faster than physically possible. The blade had found weaknesses in armor that even its creators barely knew existed. Most impossibly of all, Marcus had done it while barely exerting himself. The human's breathing was calm, his heart rate only slightly elevated. "I yield," Zarthek managed to say. The arena erupted in chaos. Spectators from dozens of species began shouting, clicking, chiming, and roaring their disbelief. This wasn't how the fight was supposed to end. The human was supposed to be crushed, humiliated, made an example of. Instead, Lord Zarthek of the Veltar Empire, one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy, had been defeated in less than 3 minutes by a human with a simple metal blade. Marcus stepped back and sheathed his knife. He looked up at the Veltar nobility in their viewing gallery, then, directly at Zarthek. "2 more trials to go," he said calmly. As the arena began to empty, with spectators hurrying to spread word of what they had witnessed, Marcus made his way back to the preparation chamber. He had won the first trial, but he knew that Zarthek would be more careful with the remaining challenges. The human sat down on a simple bench and pulled out a communication device. He activated it and waited for the connection to establish. "Chen reporting," he said quietly. "Status," came the reply from Earth. "First trial complete. Combat was successful. Any complications?" Marcus looked at his knife, noting a small nick in the blade where it had contacted Zarthek's armor. "Nothing unexpected. The target is responding as predicted." "Good. Remember, Marcus, this is bigger than one arrogant alien. The entire galaxy is watching." "Understood. Chen out." As he deactivated the device, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Lord Zarthek thought this was about putting humanity in its place. He had no idea that he was about to learn why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous species. The real trials were just beginning. The Mines Arena 3 days had passed since the combat trial, and Station Nexus Prime buzzed with activity unlike anything seen in decades. The gambling halls had been forced to close their betting pools after the humans' unexpected victory created massive financial upheaval. News feeds across the galaxy carried constant updates about the unprecedented challenge, with expert analysts from every major species offering theories about how Marcus Chen had managed to defeat a Veltar combat specialist. Lord Zarthek had spent those 3 days in his private chambers, reviewing sensor recordings of the combat from every available angle. His personal physicians had treated the superficial wounds the human had inflicted, but the damage to his pride cut far deeper than any blade. The combat armor that had protected his family for generations now bore permanent scars, thin lines where an impossible human blade had found weaknesses that shouldn't have existed. But today was different. Today would be the trial of intellect, and here Zarthek felt confident of victory. Combat might involve variables he hadn't anticipated, but intelligence was measurable, quantifiable. The human brain was primitive compared to Veltar neural architecture. Where humans had crude electrical impulses, the Veltar had evolved quantum-coherent thought processes that could perform calculations at near-instantaneous speeds. The venue for the intellectual challenge was the station's most prestigious academic facility, the Nexus Institute of Galactic Knowledge. Its crystalline walls contained libraries of information from thousands of civilizations, quantum computers that could simulate entire star systems, and testing chambers designed to challenge the finest minds in the galaxy. The main examination hall could accommodate hundreds of observers, with specialized viewing equipment that would allow spectators to follow complex mathematical proofs and logical constructions in real time. Representatives from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had requested permission to observe, including the enigmatic transcendents who rarely showed interest in lower-dimensional beings. Marcus Chen sat in a simple chair at the center of the hall, wearing the same unremarkable human clothing he had worn to the combat trial. Before him stretched a desk equipped with holographic displays, quantum processing interfaces, and direct neural link connectors that would allow rapid data access. The human ignored most of these technological aids, instead pulling out what appeared to be a small book with physical pages and a simple writing implement. Zarthek entered from the opposite side of the hall, his bioluminescent robes now displaying complex mathematical patterns that shifted and evolved with his thoughts. His neural crown, a crystalline device that enhanced his already formidable cognitive abilities, glowed with soft blue light as it established connections with the Institute's quantum database systems. The examiner for this trial was Professor Kethvar of the Zephy Collective, whose crystalline body chimed softly as she addressed the assembled crowd. "The trial of intellect will consist of 3 phases," her musical voice announced. "Mathematical analysis, strategic reasoning, and creative problem-solving. Each phase will present challenges of increasing complexity, designed to test the limits of cognitive ability." She gestured toward 2 massive holographic displays that materialized above the competitors. "All work will be visible to observers in real time. Collaboration with external sources is prohibited once each phase begins." Marcus looked up from his book, which several spectators now realized contained nothing but blank pages, and nodded his readiness. Zarthek's neural crown pulsed brighter as he accessed preliminary data feeds. "I am prepared. Phase 1, Mathematical Analysis. You will be presented with a series of theorems requiring proof. The complexity will increase until one participant can no longer provide valid solutions." The first problem appeared on both holographic displays simultaneously, a relatively simple proof involving prime number distributions that most Galactic University students could solve. Zarthek's solution appeared almost instantly, elegant mathematical symbols flowing across his display as his enhanced mind processed the logical steps. Marcus wrote something in his book with the simple pen, then looked up. "Completed. Display your work, please," Professor Kethvar chimed. Marcus held up his book, showing a single line of text written in human characters. When the universal translator processed it, the spectators saw, "Trivial by inspection of the sieve of Eratosthenes." A murmur ran through the crowd. The human's answer was technically correct. The theorem was indeed trivial if you understood the underlying principles, but it showed no work, no detailed reasoning. "Acceptable," the professor announced, though her crystalline form chimed with uncertainty. The second problem appeared. This time it required advanced calculus involving infinite dimensional spaces. Zarthek's solution filled his entire display with complex equations, geometric visualizations, and logical proofs that demonstrated mastery of mathematics at the postgraduate level. Marcus wrote another single line in his book. "Completed," he announced again. This time his answer read, "Convergence follows from the Banach-Steenhouse theorem." Again, technically correct, but impossibly concise. The spectators were beginning to realize they were witnessing something unprecedented. The problems continued to escalate in complexity. Multi-dimensional topology that would challenge a team of specialists. Quantum field equations that required understanding of physics at the subatomic level. Number theory problems that had remained unsolved for centuries. Each time, Zarthek provided elaborate, detailed solutions that showcased the full power of his enhanced intellect and technological aids. Each time, Marcus wrote a single line that somehow contained the essence of the correct answer. By the 15th problem, sweat was beginning to bead on Zarthek's forehead despite his species' advanced physiology. His neural crown was operating at maximum capacity, drawing power from the station's main reactor to perform the calculations required. The problems had reached a level where even he was struggling. Marcus continued writing single lines with unshakable calm. The 20th problem appeared on both displays, and Professor Kethvar's crystalline form chimed with what might have been excitement. "This is the helix paradox, first proposed by the transcendent mathematical philosophers 2,000 years ago. No one has ever provided a complete solution." Zarthek stared at the problem for several minutes, his enhanced mind racing through possibilities. His neural crown began to emit heat as it operated beyond safe parameters. Finally, he began constructing a solution, partial differential equations stretching across multiple dimensions, quantum mechanical operators that bent the laws of physics, topological transformations that existed only in mathematical abstraction. His work filled not just his display, but began expanding into additional holographic screens as the complexity grew beyond normal bounds. This wasn't just mathematics anymore, it was a fundamental exploration of how reality itself was constructed. After 2 hours of intense mental effort, Zarthek completed his solution. It was brilliant, innovative, and pushed the boundaries of known mathematical theory. Several observers began applauding before remembering that the trial wasn't over yet. Marcus had been sitting quietly during those 2 hours, occasionally making notes in his book but showing no signs of effort or strain. Now he looked up and smiled. "Completed," he said. Professor Kethvar chimed urgently. "Please display your solution." Marcus held up his book. Written across a single page in simple human characters were 3 words: "The question's wrong." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background hum of the station's life support systems seemed to pause. "Explain," Professor Kethvar managed. Marcus stood up and walked to the holographic display showing the helix paradox. The fundamental assumption underlying this problem is that consciousness can be separated from the mathematical framework describing reality. But consciousness isn't separate from the mathematics, consciousness is what gives mathematics meaning. He gestured at Zarthek's elaborate solution. This solution assumes an external observer measuring an objective reality. But there is no external observer. We're inside the system we're trying to describe. The paradox exists because the question assumes something impossible. The crowd erupted in chaos. Representatives from advanced civilizations were frantically consulting with their experts. The transcendents, who had maintained careful silence throughout the trial, began to flicker with what might have been excitement. Professor Kethvar's crystalline form was chiming so rapidly it created a musical cascade. That interpretation has never been considered. Because nobody asked humans, Marcus replied simply. Zarthek stared at his elaborate solution, suddenly, seeing it as an exercise in magnificent futility. He had answered the wrong question entirely. Phase 2, Professor Kethvar announced, though her voice carried less certainty than before. Strategic reasoning. The next challenge involved a complex simulation, a galactic trade war between 12 different civilizations, with economic, military, and diplomatic factors all interacting in real time. Participants would need to manage resources, predict opponent behavior, and achieve victory conditions within a simulated timeframe of 50 years. The simulation environment materialized around both competitors, a 3-dimensional representation of local galactic space, complete with trade routes, military installations, and diplomatic relationships. Each civilization was represented by different colors, with thousands of variables updating continuously. Zarthek immediately began analyzing the starting conditions, his enhanced mind processing vast amounts of data to identify optimal strategies. The Veltar were natural strategists, and this type of complex planning was exactly what his neural enhancements were designed for. Marcus looked at the simulation for approximately 30 seconds, then walked away from his control interface. "What are you doing?" Zarthek demanded. "Waiting," Marcus replied. "Waiting for what?" "For you to realize you've already lost." Zarthek's mandibles clicked in frustration. "The simulation hasn't even begun." "Yes, it has. Look at your starting position." Zarthek examined his assigned civilization, the hegemony of Kalar, a trade-focused empire with moderate military strength and excellent diplomatic relations. His opponents included militaristic species, economic powerhouses, and technologically advanced cultures. It was a balanced scenario designed to test strategic thinking under complex conditions. "I see nothing wrong with my position," he announced. Marcus walked back to the control interface, but, instead of manipulating his own civilization, he began examining Zarthek's moves. "You're playing perfectly." "Of course I am. That's the problem. Perfect play in a deterministic system produces deterministic results. You're so busy optimizing every decision that you've forgotten the most important strategic principle." "Which is?" Marcus smiled. "Sometimes the only way to win is to lose first." Without explaining further, Marcus began making moves that appeared completely irrational. His civilization, the Democratic Alliance of Fringe Worlds, made diplomatic agreements that seemed to favor other parties. They traded away valuable resources for seemingly worthless commodities. Their military remained passive even when attacked. Zarthek watched in bewilderment as the human civilization appeared to collapse entirely. Within 10 simulated years, the Democratic Alliance had lost most of its territory, its economy was in shambles, and its military was nearly non-existent.
You see? Zarthek announced triumphantly to the observers. The human has no understanding of strategy whatsoever.
But, as the simulation continued, something strange began happening. The civilizations that had conquered the Democratic Alliance's territory found themselves overextended. The resources they had taken came with hidden costs, environmental problems, rebellious populations, and economic dependencies that hadn't been apparent in the initial analysis. Meanwhile, the worthless commodities the Democratic Alliance had acquired began to reveal their true value. Cultural artifacts that suddenly became essential for diplomatic relations with newly contacted species.
Scientific data that enabled technological breakthroughs. Strategic intelligence that predicted market fluctuations years in advance.
By year 30 of the simulation, the other civilizations were struggling with the long-term consequences of their early victories.
Overextension led to internal conflicts. Economic prosperity based on conquest proved unsustainable. Military strength without diplomatic foundation created more enemies than allies.
The Democratic Alliance, meanwhile, had quietly rebuilt itself into something entirely different, not a traditional galactic power, but a network of relationships, dependencies, and influences that touched every other civilization in the simulation. By year 45, it became clear that while the other civilizations appeared stronger on paper, they all depended on the Democratic Alliance in ways they hadn't anticipated.
The human civilization had become indispensable.
When the simulation ended at year 50, the victory conditions were evaluated by quantum processors designed to handle complex multivariable analysis. Traditional metrics like territory controlled, economic output, and military strength showed the Democratic Alliance ranking last in most categories. But, the meta-analysis revealed a different picture entirely. The Democratic Alliance was the only civilization that could survive the removal of any other faction. Every other power depended on relationships, resources, or innovations that the Alliance controlled.
In a real galaxy, they would be the only truly free civilization. Professor Kethvar's crystalline form chimed with confusion.
The victory conditions appear to have been transcended.
Marcus nodded. Strategy isn't about winning the game as it's designed. It's about understanding why the game exists in the first place.
Zarthek stared at the simulation results, his enhanced mind struggling to process what had happened. By every measure he understood, his civilization had won decisively. But, the human had somehow changed the fundamental nature of victory itself.
Phase 3, Professor Kethvar announced, though she seemed uncertain whether to continue. Creative problem solving. The final challenge materialized as a simple holographic cube floating between the two competitors.
It appeared to be made of some unknown material that shifted between different states, sometimes solid, sometimes liquid, sometimes pure energy.
This is a representation of a theoretical construct known as the infinite problem, the professor explained.
It was created by the first galactic civilization to achieve transcendence, before they departed for higher dimensions.
The challenge is simple: make the cube disappear.
What are the rules?
Zarthek asked. There are none.
No restrictions, no prohibited methods, no time limits.
Simply make the cube cease to exist.
Zarthek immediately began applying everything he knew about physics, mathematics, and reality manipulation. He tried quantum dissolution techniques that would break apart the cube's molecular structure.
He attempted dimensional folding that would remove the cube from normal spacetime.
He even experimented with consciousness-based reality modification that theoretically allowed advanced minds to alter the fundamental nature of existence.
Nothing worked.
The cube continued floating serenely, occasionally shifting between its various states but showing no sign of being affected by his efforts. After hours of attempts, Zarthek's neural crown was overheating and his enhanced mind was approaching exhaustion. He had tried every technique known to galactic science and several that he had invented on the spot. Marcus, meanwhile, had been sitting quietly, occasionally glancing at the cube but showing no sign of making any effort to solve the problem.
Are you going to attempt a solution? Zarthek demanded. I already did, Marcus replied. What? When?
About 3 hours ago.
Zarthak looked at the cube, which was still floating exactly where it had appeared. The cube is still there. Is it?
Of course it is.
I can see it. Marcus smiled. Can you touch it?
Zarthak reached out to grasp the cube, his hand passing harmlessly through what appeared to be solid matter. He tried again with different approaches: energy manipulation, gravity fields, even direct neural interface attempts.
Nothing made contact with the cube.
It's a hologram, he realized.
No, Marcus said. It's not a hologram. It's not there at all. That's impossible. I can see it. You can see what you expect to see. The infinite problem isn't about making a physical object disappear.
It's about recognizing that the object was never there in the first place.
Professor Kethvar's crystalline form began chiming in complex harmonies. Explain.
Marcus stood up and walked to where the cube appeared to be floating. The first galactic civilization that achieved transcendence understood something that the rest of us are still learning. Reality isn't what exists, reality is what we perceive exists. The cube is a test of whether you can distinguish between the two. He gestured at the space where the cube appeared to be.
There's nothing here. There never was anything here.
The challenge was to stop believing in the illusion, not to destroy something real. As he spoke, the cube began to fade. Not disappearing in the sense of being destroyed or removed, simply becoming less real as the observers stopped believing in its existence. The infinite problem, Marcus continued, is infinite because you can spend forever trying to destroy something that doesn't exist. The solution is to stop trying.
The cube vanished completely.
The silence that followed stretched for several minutes.
Finally, Professor Kethvar managed to speak. The trials of intellect are complete. The human has succeeded in all 3 phases.
Zarthak stood motionless, his enhanced mind struggling to process what had happened. He had been intellectually superior by every measurable standard. His solutions had been more complex, more sophisticated, more technically impressive. But, somehow, the human had transcended the problems themselves.
This doesn't make sense, he whispered.
Marcus looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. That's because you're thinking like a machine that happens to be conscious, instead of consciousness that happens to use machines. As the crowd began to disperse, many spectators seemed dazed by what they had witnessed. The betting pools, which had already been in chaos after the combat trial, simply collapsed entirely. Nobody had anticipated that a human could not just match but transcend the intellectual capabilities of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Zarthak remained in the examination hall long after everyone else had left, staring at the space where the infinite problem had appeared to exist. His neural crown continued processing the day's events, searching for some explanation that would restore his understanding of how intelligence was supposed to work. Marcus Chen gathered his simple book and pen, preparing to leave.
How? Zarthak asked quietly. How what? How did you do any of this?
Marcus paused at the entrance to the hall.
You want to know the real difference between human intelligence and artificial enhancement? Zarthak nodded. You think faster. We think differently.
As Marcus left the hall, Zarthak realized with growing dread that there was still one trial remaining.
And if the human could transcend both combat and intellect, what would happen when they faced the trial of endurance?
For the first time in his long life, Lord Zarthak of the Veltar Empire began to doubt whether he truly understood what humans were capable of. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, their aggression, or their adaptability. It was their ability to see solutions that nobody else could imagine. The breaking point. 7 days had passed since the trial of intellect, and Station Nexus Prime had become the focal point of galactic attention unlike any event in recorded history. Trade delegations from distant star systems arrived hourly, not for commerce, but to witness what many were calling the most significant demonstration of human capability ever recorded. The betting pools had been permanently suspended after creating financial chaos across 3 star systems, but that hadn't stopped beings from gathering in massive crowds to discuss what they had witnessed. Lord Zarthek had spent those 7 days in his private chambers, but not in meditation or preparation as might be expected. Instead, he had been conducting research into human biology, psychology, and cultural history with an intensity that bordered on obsession. What he had discovered filled him with a dread that his species' enhanced physiology could barely contain.
Humans were not what the galaxy believed them to be.
The official record showed a species that had evolved on a moderately challenging world, developed space travel relatively recently, and managed to join the galactic community through a combination of luck and determination. They were considered tenacious but unremarkable, useful as soldiers and workers, but not particularly significant in the broader scope of galactic civilization. The reality was far more disturbing. Earth wasn't just a challenging world, it was a death trap that had produced the most aggressively adaptable species the galaxy had ever encountered. Where other civilizations had evolved specialized advantages for their specific environments, humans had developed the ability to survive virtually anywhere.
They were persistence hunters who could outlast prey over impossible distances.
They were social cooperators who could coordinate complex behaviors across vast populations. Most terrifyingly, they were pattern recognition specialists who could identify solutions to problems that other species couldn't even perceive as problems. The human standing across from him in the endurance trial arena embodied all of these evolutionary advantages and more. The final trial would take place in the station's environmental testing facility, a massive chamber capable of simulating virtually any planetary conditions known to galactic science. The endurance challenge would push both participants through a series of environmental extremes, testing not just physical stamina but psychological resilience, adaptive capacity, and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. Marcus Chen wore the same simple military fatigues he had worn to every trial, apparently unaware or unconcerned that he was about to face conditions that could kill most galactic species within minutes. He carried only a standard survival pack containing basic supplies, water, nutrition bars, and simple tools. Zarthek had equipped himself with the finest survival technology his civilization could provide. His environmental suit could regulate temperature across a range from near absolute zero to molten metal temperatures. His internal life support systems could process toxins, provide oxygen in any atmosphere, and supplement his natural physiology with chemical enhancers that would allow him to function far beyond normal Veltar limits. The testing facility could accommodate thousands of observers, who watched from climate-controlled galleries designed for their specific physiological needs. Representatives from civilizations across the galaxy had gathered to witness what many expected to be humanity's first failure in this unprecedented challenge. The trial coordinator was Commander Thale of the Rigoran Military Collective, a species renowned for their expertise in hostile environment operations. His powered armor gleamed with sensor arrays as he addressed the assembled crowd.
The trial of endurance will consist of 5 environmental stages, his mechanically amplified voice announced.
Arctic survival, toxic atmosphere tolerance, zero-gravity maneuvering, high radiation exposure, and psychological isolation. Participants must complete all stages without technological assistance beyond basic life support. He gestured toward both competitors.
Emergency extraction will be provided if either participant's biological functions approach critical failure. Medical assessment indicates that these conditions will challenge the absolute limits of both species' survival capabilities. Marcus checked his water supply and nutrition bars, then nodded his readiness. Zarthek activated his environmental suit systems, watching as diagnostic displays confirmed optimal function of all survival technologies. I am prepared. Stage 1, Arctic Survival.
Temperature will be reduced to -60 degrees Celsius.
Duration, 6 hours.
The chamber's atmosphere processors hummed to life, and the temperature began dropping rapidly. Within minutes, frost began forming on every surface as the environment became hostile to most forms of life. Zarthek's suit immediately began heating his body core, maintaining optimal internal temperature while monitoring external conditions. His enhanced physiology, already adapted for temperature extremes, worked in perfect harmony with his technological aids.
Marcus began moving.
It wasn't the frantic motion of someone trying to stay warm through activity. It was something else, a series of specific exercises that seemed designed to generate heat through precise muscle contractions. His breathing changed to a rhythmic pattern that maximized oxygen efficiency while minimizing heat loss. Most remarkably, he showed no signs of discomfort as the temperature continued dropping. After 2 hours in conditions that would have killed most galactic species, Zarthek's environmental suit was working harder than expected. Ice crystals were forming on his sensor arrays, and his power cells were draining faster than calculated. Meanwhile, Marcus appeared to be maintaining his core body temperature through biological processes alone. "Impossible," Zarthek muttered, his breath creating fog inside his helmet's visor.
"What's impossible?"
Marcus asked, apparently having overheard despite the howling artificial wind.
"You should be dying of hypothermia. Your species evolved on a warm world."
Marcus smiled, an expression made eerie by the frost beginning to form on his eyebrows.
"Earth isn't a warm world. Earth is a world where ice ages happen.
My ancestors survived the last one with nothing but animal skins and fire."
By hour 4, Zarthek's suit was approaching the limits of its heating capacity.
Warning indicators began flashing as power reserves dropped below safe levels. He had been designed and equipped to survive these conditions, but the environment was pushing even Veltar technology beyond its operational parameters. Marcus continued his precise movements, occasionally pausing to consume water from his pack. The human showed no signs of hypothermia, frostbite, or even significant discomfort. His evolutionary heritage was revealing itself. This was a species that had survived ice ages through biological adaptation alone. When the 6 hours ended and the temperature began returning to normal, Zarthek's environmental suit was operating on emergency power reserves. Marcus was still moving with unimpaired coordination.
Stage 2, Toxic Atmosphere Tolerance.
The chamber will be filled with a gaseous mixture lethal to most carbon-based life forms.
Duration, 4 hours.
New atmospheric processors activated, replacing the breathable air with a mixture of methane, hydrogen sulfide, and trace amounts of compounds that would cause immediate organ failure in unprotected organisms.
Emergency medical teams stood ready to intervene if either participant's biological functions approached critical failure.
Zarthek's suit switched to internal atmosphere, his life support systems filtering out toxins while providing pure oxygen to his respiratory system.
The technology was flawless, designed by master engineers who understood the dangers of hostile environments.
Marcus took a deep breath of the toxic atmosphere, held it for several seconds, then exhaled slowly.
"What are you doing?"
Zarthek demanded, his voice transmitted through the suit's communication system.
"Breathing," Marcus replied calmly. "That atmosphere will kill you." "Will it?" Marcus took another breath, showing no signs of distress.
Humans evolved on a world where the atmosphere periodically became toxic due to volcanic activity, swamp gas, and industrial pollution. Our livers are essentially chemical processing plants designed to neutralize poisons.
Zarthek checked his suit's sensors, confirming that the atmospheric composition was indeed lethal to most known life forms. Yet the human was breathing it as casually as normal air. What the Veltar Lord didn't understand was that Marcus's statement was only partially accurate.
Humans couldn't normally survive in such a toxic environment, but Marcus Chen wasn't a normal human. He was a product of Earth's most advanced biological modification programs, designed to push human adaptability to theoretical limits. His liver had been genetically enhanced to process toxins at superhuman levels. His respiratory system included modifications that allowed efficient oxygen extraction from hostile atmospheres. His cellular structure had been optimized to resist chemical damage. But these modifications built upon natural human resilience that already exceeded most species' capabilities. Earth had produced a species that could adapt to virtually any environment, and human science had simply enhanced those natural advantages. After 4 hours breathing in atmosphere that would have killed a dozen other species, both participants moved on to Stage 3 with their biological functions intact. Stage 3, Zero Gravity Maneuvering. Participants will navigate a complex obstacle course in microgravity conditions. Duration, 3 hours. The chamber's gravity generators deactivated, leaving both competitors floating in weightless conditions. A complex three-dimensional maze materialized around them, constructed of energy barriers and solid obstacles that would require precise maneuvering to navigate.
Zarthek activated his suit's maneuvering thrusters, small jets that would allow controlled movement in zero gravity.
His enhanced spatial reasoning calculated optimal paths through the maze while his suit's computer provided navigation assistance. Marcus pushed off gently from the chamber wall and began moving through the maze using only his natural coordination and understanding of physics.
What followed was a demonstration of human spatial adaptation that defied everything the galaxy understood about biological limitations.
While Zarthek maneuvered carefully through the maze using technological aids, Marcus flowed through the obstacles with an intuitive understanding of three-dimensional movement that seemed almost supernatural. Humans, Zarthek realized, were one of the few species that had evolved from tree-dwelling ancestors. They possessed innate spatial reasoning abilities that allowed them to navigate complex three-dimensional environments.
Zero gravity wasn't a hostile condition for them, it was simply another environment to master. Stage 4, High Radiation Exposure.
Participants will be subjected to levels of ionizing radiation equivalent to exposure near a pulsar.
Duration, 2 hours.
Radiation emitters activated throughout the chamber, flooding the space with energy levels that would cause cellular breakdown in most organic life forms.
Emergency medical teams monitored both participants' vital signs as the invisible death filled the air around them.
Zarthek's suit immediately activated its radiation shielding, creating an electromagnetic field that deflected most of the harmful energy while specialized filters removed radioactive particles from his air supply. Even with these protections, he could feel the effects as his enhanced physiology worked to repair cellular damage faster than it occurred. Marcus stood calmly in the middle of the radiation field, showing no apparent concern for the lethal energy surrounding him. "Your cellular structure should be breaking down," Zarthek observed, his voice tight with strain as his body fought the radiation effects.
"It is," Marcus replied conversationally. "But it's also repairing itself."
Humans evolved on a world with high background radiation due to reduced magnetic field strength during pole reversals.
Our DNA repair mechanisms are extremely efficient. Again, this was only part of the truth.
Natural human radiation resistance was moderate compared to some species, but Marcus's genetic modifications included enhanced cellular repair mechanisms that could function at superhuman levels. Combined with his species' natural adaptability, this made him essentially immune to radiation levels that would kill most galactic civilizations. After 2 hours of exposure that would have been lethal to unprotected organisms, both participants survived to face the final stage.
Stage 5, Psychological Isolation.
Participants will be placed in separate chambers designed to simulate complete sensory deprivation and social isolation.
Duration, indefinite. The trial ends when one participant requests extraction.
Separate chambers materialized around each competitor, featureless environments that blocked all external stimuli while monitoring their psychological states. No light, no sound, no tactile sensations beyond basic life support. Just endless, empty existence with nothing but their own minds for companionship.
For most species, prolonged sensory deprivation led to rapid psychological breakdown.
The mind, deprived of external input, would begin creating its own stimuli through hallucinations, paranoia, and eventual complete dissociation from reality. Even the most psychologically stable individuals could rarely endure more than a few hours before requesting extraction. Zarthek had prepared for this challenge through meditation techniques and mental exercises designed to maintain psychological stability. His enhanced cognitive abilities would allow him to perform complex calculations and logical exercises that would keep his mind occupied during the isolation period.
He lasted 18 hours before the hallucinations began.
By hour 24, his enhanced mind was creating elaborate fantasies to fill the sensory void. He conversed with imaginary companions, experienced false memories of events that had never occurred, and began to lose the ability to distinguish between thought and reality. At hour 36, he requested extraction. Marcus Chen remained in psychological isolation for another 62 hours. When the chamber finally opened and he emerged into normal light and sound, he appeared unchanged by the experience. His vital signs were normal, his psychological evaluation showed no signs of stress or dissociation, and his first action was to ask if anyone had brought coffee.
"How?"
Zarthek demanded, his voice hoarse from his ordeal.
"How did you endure that?"
Marcus shrugged. Humans are social creatures, but we're also capable of extended solitude when necessary. Some of our philosophers and mystics have spent years in isolation without losing their sanity.
Besides, I wasn't really alone. What do you mean? I was thinking about home. About Earth. About the billions of humans who are depending on the outcome of this challenge.
When you're carrying the hopes of your entire species, you're never really isolated. The trials were over. Marcus Chen had not just survived all 5 stages, he had transcended them, demonstrating human capabilities that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about biological limitations.
Commander Thale's voice echoed through the facility as he announced the results. The trials of endurance are complete. The human has exceeded all performance parameters.
The crowd erupted in chaos once again, but this time there was a different quality to the noise. Fear was mixing with amazement as representatives from advanced civilizations realized they had fundamentally misunderstood what humanity represented. Zarthek stood in the center of the chamber, staring at Marcus Chen with an expression of defeat that went beyond the loss of a simple wager. His understanding of galactic hierarchy, of natural order, of the fundamental nature of intelligence and capability itself had been shattered by a species he had considered inferior. "I have lost," he announced formally, his voice carrying clearly through the facility's communication systems. "According to the terms of our agreement, the mining rights to the Kepler 442 system now belong to humanity." But Marcus shook his head.
"I don't want your mining rights." "What?" "I never wanted your mining rights."
"I don't want your family's wealth, your territory, or your titles."
Zarthek's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Then, why did you accept the challenge?"
Marcus looked up at the galleries filled with representatives from across the galaxy, ensuring his words would be heard by every major civilization. "Because the galaxy needs to understand what humanity really is. You see us as newcomers, primitives who got lucky. You underestimate us because we don't fit your models of how advanced civilizations should develop." He gestured toward the environmental chamber where he had just survived conditions that would kill most galactic species. "But we're not primitives. We're survivors. We're the species that conquered the most hostile planet in the galaxy using nothing but intelligence, cooperation, and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. We're the descendants of creatures that survived ice ages, supervolcano eruptions, asteroid impacts, and countless other extinction-level events." Marcus's voice grew stronger as he spoke, carrying the confidence of a species that had never truly been tested by galactic civilization. "You think your technology makes you superior. Your enhanced intelligence, your sophisticated societies, your ancient traditions. But when everything else fails, when your technology breaks down and your enhancements stop working and your civilizations collapse, there will still be humans. Because survival isn't about being the smartest or the strongest or the most advanced. It's about being able to adapt to whatever comes next." The chamber had fallen completely silent. Even the background noise of the station's systems seemed muted as the galaxy listened to humanity's declaration of its true nature. "So keep your mining rights, Lord Zarthek. Keep your wealth and your titles and your assumptions about how things should work. But understand that humanity isn't asking for permission to exist anymore. We're not requesting membership in your galactic community. We're informing you that we're here, and we're not going anywhere." Zarthek found his voice after a long moment. "What do you want from us?" Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since the trials began, there was something predatory in his expression. "Respect. Recognition. And the understanding that when the galaxy faces its next existential crisis, and there will be one, you're going to need us. Because humans don't just survive. We make sure everyone else survives too." As Marcus Chen left the facility, the assembled representatives began urgent communications with their home governments. The implications of what they had witnessed were staggering. Humanity wasn't just another galactic civilization, they were something entirely new. A species that combined technological advancement with biological resilience, intellectual sophistication with primal survival instincts, and individual capability with collective cooperation. Lord Zarthek remained in the chamber long after everyone else had departed, contemplating the ruins of his worldview. He had risked his honor on the assumption that humans were inferior, that they could be put in their proper place through a simple demonstration of superior capability. Instead, he had discovered that humanity's proper place was wherever they chose to stand.
The galaxy would never be the same. 3 months later, when the first reports arrived of an extinction-level threat approaching from outside the galactic rim, every major civilization's first question was the same: what do the humans recommend we do? Humanity's answer was characteristically simple: we fight. We adapt. We survive. Together. And, the galaxy, for the first time in its recorded history, united under the leadership of the species they had once considered primitive newcomers. Because when existence itself was threatened, there was no one else they trusted to find a way through the impossible. Lord Zarthek, who had lost his honor betting against human capability, became one of their most devoted allies. Because he had learned the most important lesson the galaxy could teach: never underestimate a species that evolved to survive the impossible. The age of humanity had begun.